This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Trump just trolling? Not serious about revoking the security clearances of the Obama Six? Brennan, Rice,
Comey,
McCabe, Hayden, and clap on, clap off, James Clapper.
Brennan. Angry pants.
Paul Ryan said as much. Don't really take it too seriously.
I think he's trolling people, honestly. This is something that's in the purview of the executive branch. I think some of these people have already lost their clearances. I think he's just trolling people.
Well, Comey and McCabe, since they were fired, I heard that they did lose their security clearance.
Well,
it's part of their separation package, so they could spend more time with their family.
Well, Paul Ryan may not think Trump is serious about it. Maybe Trump isn't serious about it, but Rand Paul is. He seriously thinks the security clearances should be revoked for these guys. And frankly, across the board, once you leave government, you should no longer have security clearance. Rand Paul making the argument.
Well, you know, I told the president in private what I've been saying in public, that I think there's a great danger to having talking heads on TV who are ex-CIA agents and still have classified clearance. There's a real danger that they might inadvertently reveal classified information. And, you know, John Brennan's got a history of this. Back in 2012, when we were discussing, we discovered the underwear bomber. John Brennan at that time briefed ex-CIA agents who were retired but still had top secret clearance. He briefed them and said, oh, don't worry, the U.S. has someone inside. We have inside control. Well, then one of these ex-CIA agents went on television and said, oh, yeah, we have a double agent and nobody needs to worry. And it's like, whoops, the double agent was still there. So John Brennan's already been involved when he was on the inside, leaking information to people who still had top secret clearance, who were now talking heads. John Brennan leaked information that almost cost the life of a double agent. This is 4 years ago now.
That's a good example, and this is why Rand Paul concludes.
But I would make it more universal. I don't think that ex-CIA agents of any stripe who are now talking heads should continue to get classified information. I think it's wrong.
For more on this and other topics, we're pleased to be joined by Rich Lowry. He's the editor of National Review, nationalreview.com, Fox News contributor, author of the book Lincoln Unbound. Rich, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So is revoking the security clearances of those individuals named part of draining the swamp, or is it, as Clapper said, is it a petty political retribution?
I think it's a petty thing, the way they're rolling this out and presenting it. I think Rand Paul makes a case for what would be a categorical rule or change in how you do this globally, but just targeting these couple people feels petty. Not that I have any use for John Brennan or for Clapper, and I think they've really kind of disgraced themselves, and it's really bad practice for people who had some of the most sensitive powers in the United States government to immediately come out and out themselves as poisonous partisans. I think that's really bad. It undermines faith in our system, but I don't think this is the way to go about it.
Elections have consequences, and their team lost. So I was surprised to know that they still have access to sensitive information. And why do they? Can you explain that?
Well, I mean, the theory is that, say, in a crisis, you might want former officials to have access to this information again, or you might just routinely want to consult them over sensitive matters, so you want them to have the clearance. So I don't think, obviously, the Trump administration in no circumstances is ever going to coordinate with John Brennan over anything. Another rationale I've heard is that if you want to talk to Brennan about past things you're wondering how he handled, you'd still want him to have a security clearance. But I'm not opposed to some broad change in the policy. I just think specifically targeting 5 or 6 people who've irritated and criticized you is not a good look.
A lot of attention paid to Trump's Twitter war with Iranian dictator Rouhani, and not enough, and you made this point at National Review as well, not enough paid to the speech that his Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, gave Sunday at the Reagan Library on Iran, and where he laid out in great detail. I mean, it was really Reagan-esque in its quality, so the venue was appropriate. Great detail, the corruption of the Iranian mullahs, a good historical perspective on the revolution 4 decades later. I mean, it was really a powerful, thoughtful speech that probably should have got more attention than the Twitter war between the two principals.
Yeah, it was a tremendous speech, and really it was a regime change kind of speech. That's technically not their policy. But, again, on Trump's tweet, it's like a lot of these things, I understand the impulse. The Iranians are threatening us, and you really want to push back. Trump did on Twitter in all caps. But that's not really the main event. The main event is coming here on August 6th when a lot of the sanctions snap back. And then by November, we hope to get to zero to really cancel out all Iranian oil exports. It would be a very big deal. I don't think we're not going to get all the way to zero, but we can put a really crimp in it. And that's 80% of Iran's exports. And Iran is already in a slow-moving economic crisis prior to us reapplying any of the sanctions. So we have a lot of leverage here. I don't think we're going to, a lot of people were worried when Trump was doing the Fire and Fury campaign against Kim Jong-un that it heralded, potential war. I think we can be a little wiser now that the tweet doesn't mean we're on the cusp of military conflict with Iran, but we are in a confrontation with them. And when Trump first pulled out of the deal, everyone's like, oh, this is the end of the Western alliance. We'll never have any leverage over them, and the Iranians will immediately break out towards a nuclear weapon. None of that's happened, and we clearly have a lot of cards to play.
Speaking of Kim Jong-un, a report out this week that satellite images show Kim keeping his pledge, ostensibly, to dismantle key missile launch sites. How much should we be encouraged by the report of Kim Jong-un moving in a direction towards denuclearization, apparently?
I think it's good. Obviously, it's better than the alternative. It's still, for me, would be in accord with a longer-term approach that would be good for Kim and bad for us, which is just to string us along, to make it harder for us to maintain the sanctions regime, to entice the South Koreans and the Chinese to letting up the pressure or lobbying us to give them exceptions to start doing business with North Korea. And I don't think, Kim was going to be able just totally to stiff Trump and get away with it. So I think an approach that makes more sense from his perspective is actually to do some stuff and to string us along. So unfortunately, this whole thing so far has played out with my most pessimistic scenario. Is consistent with my most pessimistic scenario. Now, maybe there's some small chance that there's really a real change of heart in this regime, and he's really going to denuclearize. But I think that's very unlikely.
President Trump and Kim Jong-un, they started out on Twitter, and then they eventually met face to face. Do you think President Trump will ever meet face to face with Rouhani?
I hope not. I was not a fan of the face to face with Kim, so I hope we wouldn't do it with the Iranians as well. And if he did that, I hope it would only happen when the regime is really on its knees.
Spanning the globe of dictators and ne'er-do-wells, not to not much fanfare, Daniel Ortega has reemerged in Nicaragua. He gave a rather remarkable and curious, by choosing to do so, interview with Bret Baier on Fox News this week, and Bret did a nice job trying to hold Ortega to account for, the old Marxist repression of making people disappear, murdering protesters and the like. And I just look at Venezuela and Nicaragua, the protests in Managua, the government's reaction, the oppression and repression, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Comrade Bernie running around the Midwest arguing for quote-unquote democratic socialism with, other than the violence, mirrors a lot of the policies you see in Central and South America. And I just wonder if Ocasio-Cortez and Comrade Bernie turn out to be the Republicans' greatest weapon this fall.
Yeah, so first of all, it's just very depressing and amazing how enduring the Daniel Ortega and his family have been. We thought we'd gotten rid of them in the 1980s or the early 1990s, but they're still there, so it's sort of Castro-like and still destroying their country. So the worst case scenario there is that you have a Venezuela type meltdown. And I will say this for Bernie and his ilk: we are a liberal society. I don't think we're ever going down the Venezuela path, but this is, there's an organic connection. These are socialists, so you think they would feel a little more ownership of these kind of regimes than they do. And lastly, the Democrats' lurch left is the best thing Republicans have going. There was a Wall Street Journal poll that showed a couple days ago that more people than ever think that the Democratic congressional candidates are out of the mainstream. The favorable rating of the Democratic Party is 35%. The favorable rating for the Republican Party is 34%. So Democrats, they may win the House. They may even win it big, depending on how things slide here the last 100 days. But they are a party that is in the midst of its own identity crisis and slow rolling revolution.
He is Rich Lowry, editor of National Review, nationalreview.com, Fox News contributor, author of the book Lincoln Unbound. Rich, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro